Welcome to the Veil Weaver. Come in, find somewhere comfortable, and let the evening settle around you. Let the sounds of the day go quiet. Let the particular weight of whatever today was, its business, its noise, its demands on your attention, begin to loosen its hold. You have somewhere better to be tonight. Tonight we are going south. South and east, across a sea that the people who lived beside it called wine dark. Not because the water was that color exactly, but because that was how it felt to them. Ancient, deep, full of something that could sustain you or destroy you, depending on how carefully you attended to it. A sea with memory. A sea that had been carrying human stories back and forth across its surface for so long that the stories had become part of the water itself, folded in, impossible to separate from the salt and the current and the particular quality of the light on certain evenings when the sun goes down behind the islands and the whole world turns briefly. Impossibly beautiful. We are going to the world that lived beside that sea. Ancient Greece, the civilization that gave the Western world so much of what it still thinks with, its philosophy, its theatre, its democracy, its medicine, its understanding of the hero and the tragedy and the forces that govern both, the civilization that built the Parthenon and wrote the Iliad and looked at the night sky and named the stars and decided, with a thoroughness no culture before it had quite managed, to try to understand everything. And that was afraid. Underneath all the philosophy and the marble and the clean geometric logic of its public life, this world was deeply and specifically afraid of certain women. Not all women. The Greek world had its goddesses, its queens, its honored dead. It had women it mourned, and women whose stories it told so many times that the telling became a form of reverence. But the Greek world was also a world in which women's lives were, in practice, very small. They lived in the inner rooms of the house. They were not citizens. They did not vote or own property or move freely through public space. The gap between the women in the myths, Athena, Hera, Medea, Circe, towering figures of power and consequence, and the actual women of ancient Athens was enormous. And I find myself thinking that the gap is not incidental, that the enormous mythological women are, in some sense, what gets produced when a culture puts the actual women in very small rooms. All that power has to go somewhere. It went into the stories. And the stories told about the women who wielded power, who knew things, who could do things, who could not be controlled in the ordinary ways. The stories of fear as much as stories of wonder. The Greek world needed these women. It was afraid of them. And it told their stories in ways that served both needs simultaneously, making them magnificent and making them monstrous, often in the same breath, often in the same sentence. Tonight, I want to look at some of those stories again, more slowly than they are usually told, turning them over, holding them up to the light, asking what the poets said and what they didn't say, and what the silence might contain. Because the women in these stories left traces that the poems couldn't entirely erase. And if you look carefully enough, if you listen for what's missing as much as what's there, you find them. Not the monsters the tradition made of them, but the actual women underneath. Complex, motivated, frequently right, frequently wronged. Women who knew things. The Greeks had a word for what they practiced. Pharmakeia. It is the ancestor of our word pharmacy. In its original sense, it meant the use of substances, of plants and compounds and preparations, for purposes that might be medical or might be magical, the boundary between those categories being considerably less fixed than it would later become. A pharmakon was a drug, a remedy, a poison, a spell. All of these simultaneously, its nature determined not by its chemistry alone, but by the intention of the person who used it and the forces they served. And the women who wielded pharmakeia most completely, who understood it most deeply, who were most willing to push it to its furthest reaches, are the women tonight is about. But before we meet them, we need to meet the goddess who stands behind them all, who stands, in fact, behind everything tonight, at the crossroads, in the dark, with 2 torches. There is a place where 3 roads meet, not a place you would choose to be in the ordinary way, not a destination. A crossroads is a between place, the point where one direction becomes 3, where the decision of which way to go has not yet been made, where the traveler stands in the particular uncertainty of multiple possibilities before committing to one and leaving the others behind forever. In the ancient Greek world, this quality of the crossroads, its refusal to be simply one thing, its insistence on being several things at once, made it charged. A crossroads was a place where the ordinary rules of the world were thinner than they were elsewhere, where the boundary between the living world and the world below was more permeable, where you might encounter things you would not encounter on a straight road between 2 known points, where, in particular, you might encounter Hecate. She is standing there now, in the image the ancient world returned to again and again, at the point where the 3 roads diverge, in the dark of a night with no moon. Hecate's night, the dark of the moon, when the sky offers nothing, and the only light is what you bring yourself. She carries 2 torches, one in each hand, held high. They make a small, warm circle of ground around her. Beyond that circle, the roads going away into darkness in 3 directions. The world doing its enormous, indifferent business in the dark. Hecate stands at the center, looking at all 3 roads at once. This is who she is, the one who holds the light at the point where directions multiply, who is present at the moment of choice, not making the choice for you, not directing you down one road or another, but illuminating the divergence, making visible the fact that there are 3 paths, and you must take one of them. She is very old, older than most of the Greek gods, older than the Olympians, older than Zeus and Hera and Poseidon and Athena. She belongs to an earlier layer of divinity, the titans and the figures who came before them, the ones who governed the world before the gods of Olympus imposed their particular order. Her parents are Perses and Asteria, titan figures whose names carry the light of stars and the quality of destruction. She is, in origin, a goddess of the sky and the earth and the sea simultaneously, a triple sovereignty that the later tradition crystallized into her 3 realms: the heavens above, the earth we walk on, and the underworld below. She moves between all 3. This is the quality that made her, of all the Greek deities, the one most closely associated with magic, not because magic was inherently dark or dangerous, though it could be both, but because magic, at its root, is the movement between categories, the transformation of one thing into another, the crossing of boundaries that are supposed to hold. And Hecate was the boundary crosser, the one who moved between the living and the dead, between above and below, between the human and the divine, between what is and what could be made. She was the patron of Circe. She was the patron of Medea. When those women, the most powerful witches in the Greek tradition, needed to call upon a divine power to give their work its authority, it was Hecate they called. At night, at the crossroads, or at the sea's edge, where the land and the water made their own boundary, they lit torches in her honor and spoke her name. She came. In the ancient world, small shrines to Hecate stood at the entrances to homes and at the crossroads of cities. Hecateion, they were called. Households left offerings for her at the end of each month, on the night of the new moon. Food and small figures placed at the threshold, the boundary between inside and outside, not out of fear alone, out of the acknowledgement that she was there, that the threshold was a real thing, and that something attended to it. She was not frightening in the earliest accounts, or she was not only frightening, she was powerful, which is something different. She gave gifts to sailors, safe passage, to the newly born, health, to those who stood at crossroads in their lives, the particular gift of her attention, the quality of being seen clearly at the moment of maximum uncertainty. There is something in Hecate that the later tradition worked hard to darken, to make her purely nocturnal, purely associated with death and ghosts and things that should not be named. And I wonder about that hardening, about what it means that the goddess of the threshold, the one who moved between worlds, was gradually rewritten into something to be feared rather than honored. What was threatening about a goddess whose gift was seen clearly at the moment of choice? Perhaps that is obvious. Perhaps clarity at the moment of choice is precisely the thing that certain kinds of power cannot afford to have available to everyone. She is standing at the crossroads tonight. She will be standing there when the last of our stories ends. Everything that happens between now and then happens within the circle of her torchlight. We begin with the one who lived alone on an island in the middle of the sea, the daughter of the sun itself, the woman whose story Homer tells from the outside, from the perspective of the man who came to her island and left after a year, and whose inner life, whose history, whose own experience of all of it, Homer never quite gets around to asking about. I find myself wanting to ask. The island appears out of the morning mist the way certain things appear in that sea. Suddenly, without warning, as though it had been somewhere else, entirely a moment ago, and has only just decided to be here. It is green, intensely, almost aggressively green, in the way of Mediterranean islands in the early morning, when the light is still low and the dew is still on everything, and the colours have not yet been bleached by the midday heat into the pale gold and silver of afternoon. Trees on the hillside, the smell of wood smoke reaching you before you can see its source, thin and pale, rising with the deliberate straightness of smoke from a fire that is well tended, that has been burning for a long time, that has no intention of going out. And somewhere in the trees, a woman singing. This is how Homer introduces Circe in the 10th book of the Odyssey. The singing is beautiful. The smoke means warmth, habitation, food and rest after a very long time at sea. All the signals are welcoming, and yet her name is Circe in the Greek, the word related to the hawk, the circling bird that moves in wide arcs above the thing it has already identified, that takes its time because it does not need to hurry. She is the daughter of Helios, the sun god, who drives the chariot of the sun across the sky and sees everything below him with the comprehensive, judgment-free clarity of something that illuminates without being involved, and of Perse, an oceanid, a daughter of ocean, belonging to the layer of divinity that predates the Olympians, older than order. From her father, she inherited the quality of light, the capacity to see clearly, to illuminate, to make the hidden visible. From her mother, the quality of the deep sea, the depth, the capacity for transformation, the indifference of something so large and so old that the categories we use to organize our lives simply do not apply to it. Her brother is Aetes, king of Colchis. His daughter will be Medea, Circe's niece, her blood, her inheritor, the next generation of the same gift. Circe lives alone on Moirai. She has been here for a long time, long enough that the island has shaped itself around her presence, or she has shaped herself around the island. The stone house in the clearing is old, its walls thick, its interior full of the accumulated materials of a practice that has been running without interruption for longer than most human lifetimes. Bundles of herbs hanging to dry, jars of preparations on shelves, with the casual organization of someone who knows exactly what each one contains. A great loom in the corner. Homer mentions the loom, mentions that the cloth she weaves has a quality that exceeds anything human hands produce. And in the clearing around the house, the animals, lions, wolves, moving through the space around the house with the ease of creatures that have been there for a long time and made their peace with where they are. They do not attack the men who come to the island. They approach. They look. They behave with the specific attentiveness of creatures that have something in them that is not quite animal. A quality of recognition, of reading the person in front of them rather than simply assessing them as prey or threat. The men who come to the island find this alarming, which is the correct response. A wolf that does not behave like a wolf is more frightening than a wolf that does. They go in anyway, because they are tired, because they are hungry, because the smoke means warmth, and the warmth means safety. And they have been at sea for too long to weigh these promises carefully against what the animals in the clearing might mean. Homer tells us that Circe feeds them, gives them cheese and barley and honey and wine, mixes the pharmakeia into the food, touches them with her wand, and transforms them into pigs. He tells it quickly, almost casually. The transformation is presented as simple, as obvious, as the natural thing she does with men who arrive on her island. Swiftly done, on to the next part of the story. But I find myself stopping here, wanting to go back. What happened before the food? What did these men do when they arrived at a woman's isolated house? When they found themselves alone with her? When the normal structures of the world, the ships, the hierarchy, the presence of other men, were temporarily removed? Homer is not interested in this question. The Odyssey is not Circe's story. It is Odysseus' story, and Circe is an episode in it. And her interiority, her history, her reasons for doing what she does, are not what the poem is for. but there are traces if you look. The animals in the clearing have been there a long time. The lions and the wolves and whatever else moves through that space have been accumulating since before Odysseus's crew arrived. This was not the first ship to come to Aiwea, not the first group of men to find the smoke and hear the singing and go toward it. The transformation was a practice, a habit even, something she had done enough times to have refined it, to have developed a specific preparation for a specific situation. What were the situations? What happened on the previous arrivals that made the preparation necessary? Homer doesn't ask. I think about the question. A woman alone on an island, a woman with power, which means a woman who can be identified at a distance as potentially useful. Ships arriving uninvited. Men who have been at sea for a long time, who are far from home, who believe themselves in a world where the ordinary rules do not apply because they are beyond the edge of the map. The pig transformation starts to look different when you hold it this way. Not as cruelty, not as casual malice, as a response, specific, effective, repeatedly proven to work, to a situation that had recurred enough times to require a permanent solution. The animals in the clearing are not trophies. They are what remains after she dealt with arrivals that required dealing with. This reading doesn't make Circe innocent in any simple sense, but it makes her something more interesting than simply dangerous. It makes her someone who had reasons, whose power was also protection, who built her practice in the clearing of a remote island, not out of a desire to harm, but out of what the world had taught her about what men who arrive uninvited, beyond the edge of the map, tend to want. Odysseus arrives. He is different. He has been given an antidote by Hermes, a herb called molly, white-flowered and black-rooted, which grows only in the divine world and which blocks the effect of the pharmakeia. He eats the food. Nothing happens. She touches him with the wand. He draws his sword and advances on her, following Hermes' instructions exactly, and she falls back. Homer uses a word that implies shock, or something adjacent to shock, the reaction of someone who has encountered a thing that was not supposed to be possible. She asks who he is. She recognizes the molly, knows it came from Hermes, understands that this man is not ordinary. And then she says something that stops me every time I read it. She says, "You must be Odysseus, the one whose coming Hermes has always told me to expect." She has been expecting him. Think about what this means. Circe, on her island, has been told by Hermes, the divine messenger, the one who moves between the worlds, that a specific man would come, that this man would be different, that when he arrived, things would be different. She has been waiting, through however many other arrivals, through however many transformations, for this one. And he has arrived, and he is pointing a sword at her. What she does next is invite him to her bed. Homer presents this as Hermes' instruction. Odysseus has been told to accept, but to make her swear an oath first, that she will not harm him. The oath is sworn. They become lovers. I want to stay here a little longer than the poem does. Circe has been alone on this island for a very long time. The exact length is not given, but long enough to have transformed a clearing's worth of men into animals, long enough that the practice is refined and automatic. And here is someone who could not be transformed, who arrived with the protection of the gods, who sat in her hall and ate her food and looked at her and saw her, not as an obstacle or a threat, or a resource to be extracted, but as the specific, extraordinary being she actually is. Homer moves past the year that follows with the efficiency of a poet who knows what the story is about and what it is not about. There is feasting, there is rest. Odysseus's men eat and drink and recover from years of war and deprivation, and Odysseus and Circe are together in the way that the poem implies without dwelling on, which is, in Homer, as clear an indication as anything that something significant is happening. But what was it like for her? The poem doesn't say. It has never been the poem's concern. And yet, I find myself imagining the specific quality of a year spent with someone who can resist what you are, who sees you without the distortion of fear or the simplification of desire, who is genuinely your equal in some fundamental way that almost no one has ever been. The particular texture of knowing from the beginning that it will end, that he has a home, a wife, a son, a story that requires him to leave, that the year is the thing, not the after. When he leaves, Circe does not try to stop him. She sends him away properly. Provisions, the right wind, the ritual instructions for what he will face on the way home. She gives him everything she has that will help him survive the journey, including the information about the Sirens. Let me tell you about the Sirens, because Circe is the one who tells Odysseus about them. They appear in the story through her mouth. She is the bridge between him and what he is about to face. And the warning she gives him is one of the most interesting passages in the entire Odyssey. And it is almost never discussed for what it reveals about Circe herself. The Sirens sit on a rock in the sea. Two of them, in most accounts, though sometimes three. Bird women. This is the older image, before the later tradition conflated them with mermaids. Women from the waist up, birds from the waist down, perched on their rock, surrounded by the bones and rotting flesh of the sailors who came to them and could not pull away. They sing. The song carries across the water with a clarity and a sweetness that has no equivalent in any human music. It is described in the Odyssey itself in terms that suggest not pleasure exactly, but completion. The specific quality of hearing something you did not know you were missing until you heard it. Every ship that passes the Sirens' rock turns toward them. Every crew that hears the song is compelled toward the source of it, regardless of what lies between the ship and the rock. They cannot stop. The want is absolute, and the rock is rocks. The ship breaks, the men die, and the Sirens sing on. Circe tells Odysseus this. She tells him precisely, specifically, with the knowledge of someone who has thought about it in detail. Not the abstract knowledge of a god who watches from above, but the specific knowledge of someone who understands what it means to use your voice as power, to be a woman who draws men toward her with sound. She tells him the practical solution: beeswax in the ears of his crew so they cannot hear. But she adds something else. She says, if you yourself want to hear the song, and she says this with the specific understanding of a woman who has known him for a year, who understands that he will want to hear it, that his nature requires the experience of everything, then have yourself tied to the mast. Have your men bind you to it and tell them that no matter what you say, no matter how you beg or order them, they must not release you until you are past the rock. She gives him a way to have the experience without dying from it. This is what Circe does when she loves someone. not transformation, not binding, not the permanent reduction of someone to a simpler form. She designs with extraordinary precision the exact experience that will give him what he needs while keeping him alive. She understands his nature, and she accommodates it. She threads the needle between his desire and his survival so carefully that the needle is invisible. Now hold this against what the Sirens do. The Sirens also draw men toward them with their voices. The Sirens also have a song that reaches inside the listener and finds the specific thing he most deeply wants. But the Sirens are not interested in what happens after the wanting. They do not give the experience safely. They do not thread any needle. They offer the approach and only the approach, and the approach ends on the rocks. And that is all there is. The difference between Circe and the Sirens is not the power. It is what the power is for. And here is where the Sirens' own story becomes important. The part that Homer doesn't tell, that exists in the older tradition underneath the Odyssey. The Sirens were not always what they are on the rock. In the older accounts, before Homer placed them in the sea as a hazard to navigation, they were something else entirely. They were companions of Persephone, the goddess of spring, the daughter of Demeter, who was taken by Hades to the underworld. The Sirens were Persephone's handmaidens, her companions in the meadow, where she was gathering flowers when the ground opened and she was gone. And after she was taken, Demeter gave the Sirens wings so that they could search for her daughter, so that they could fly over land and sea, looking for the girl who had been lost. They searched. They did not find her. Persephone was in the underworld, which is not a place you can reach by flying. And the Sirens, after all the searching, came to rest on their rock in the sea. What I want to sit with is the grief in that origin. The song the Sirens sing is the song of people who have been looking for something for a very long time and have not found it, who have been searching with all of themselves. Wings, voice, the total commitment of beings who are given a purpose and could not fulfill it, and who have arrived finally at a kind of singing that is what searching sounds like when it has nowhere left to go. Every sailor who hears the song and turns his ship toward the rock is hearing something that promises completion, that promises the end of longing. That sounds to the deepest part of him like the thing he has been looking for finally found. And perhaps it is. Perhaps the Siren song carries in it the genuine quality of what it is to find, or to be about to find, the thing you most want. The promise is real. The impossibility of delivery is also real. The Sirens are not lying. They are simply offering what cannot be given, the sensation of arriving without the destination. They have been looking for Persephone for a very long time. The search became the song. The song became the thing that kills. Odysseus hears it. He is tied to the mast, as Circe instructed. His men's ears are stopped with wax. The ship moves past a rock at the speed of a ship, with no one rowing toward anything. Just the wind, just the current, and the Sirens sing. And Odysseus, who has survived the war at Troy, and the cave of the Cyclops, and the land of the dead itself. Odysseus strains against his ropes and begs his men to release him, weeps, commands them. The ropes hold. He hears the whole song from beginning to end, tied to a mast on a passing ship, and it does not kill him. And he never stops wanting to go toward it. Circe gave him that, gave him the impossible thing, the siren song, heard whole, survived. Think about what she understood to design that experience. She understood the song. She understood what it is to draw men toward you with your voice, what it costs, what it produces, what it means when the drawing and the arriving are not the same thing. She is the woman who knows how to give someone the experience of desire without the wreckage it usually causes. Perhaps she learned that in the years on Arsia. Perhaps she learned it from what she could not undo. Odysseus' ship passes the rock. The song fades behind them. The sirens watch the ship go. They are still there. They will be there for as long as there are ships to pass. And Circe is still on her island. The loom in the corner. The fire in the hearth. The animals in the clearing with their two knowing eyes. The year was the year. It ended as she knew it would. The smoke still rises from her house in the mornings with the deliberate straightness of a fire that has no intention of going out. She is still singing. We leave Circe behind now and travel to Colchis. Colchis is at the edge of the world, or it was at the edge of the world, as the Greeks understood it, at the far eastern end of the Black Sea, where the sea ran out and the land of the Caucasus began, where the mountains were higher than any mountains the Mediterranean world had direct knowledge of. Colchis was real, a kingdom on the eastern shore of the Black Sea, roughly where western Georgia is today, but in the mythological imagination, it occupied the borderland between the known and the unknown. The last place before you fell off the map. It was ruled by Aeetes, the son of Helios, Circe's brother. His daughter was Medea. She was a priestess of Hecate, a practitioner of pharmakeia of extraordinary power, greater, some accounts suggest, even than Circe's, and given their shared blood, that is saying something significant. She knew the Caucasian herbs that grew in different soils under different skies and had properties that the Mediterranean world had no equivalent for. She knew the stars and could read in them what was coming. She could call on Hecate directly and be heard. She was, in a full sense of the word, a witch, and she had been raised in a kingdom at the edge of the world where that was not a shameful thing to be. It was a sacred one. She was also young when the Argo arrived. This matters, and it is something the tradition tends to skip past in its eagerness to get to the dramatic parts of her story. Medea at the beginning is not the terrifying figure of the later myths. She is a girl, a very gifted and very serious girl at the court of a frightening king who looks over the palace wall one day and sees a ship that has come from further than ships usually come from, and on it a man who is looking for something, who has come an enormous distance for it, who is afraid and is going to try anyway. She was struck. The tradition is not subtle about the mechanism. Aphrodite or Eros or the fates arranged that Medea would look at Jason and fall immediately and completely. The word used in Apollonius of Rhodes's Argonautica, which is our most detailed account of this part of the story, carries the suggestion of a wound, not a metaphor, something that entered her and stayed there and changed the chemistry of everything after. I want to be careful here about how we read this. The tradition's instinct is to attribute Medea's choice to divine intervention. Aphrodite's arrow, Eros's bolt, in a way that removes her agency from the equation entirely. She didn't choose to help Jason. She was made to. The gods did it. This reading is convenient for the tradition because it means that when everything goes wrong later, when the choices she made for love produce their catastrophic consequences, those consequences can be attributed to divine mischief rather than to anything Jason did or failed to do. But I don't think that reading survives a careful look at the text. Apollonius gives us Medea's interior at length and in extraordinary detail. Her sleepless night, the argument she has with herself, the full accounting of what helping Jason will cost. She goes through it all. She knows exactly what she is doing. The gods may have started the feeling, the decision to act on it, to meet him at night in the grove of Hecate, to press the ointment into his hands, was hers. She helps him. The ointment she gives him is made from a flower that grew from the blood of Prometheus, the Titan who stole fire from the gods for humanity, who was punished eternally for the gift. The root of that flower carries in it the quality of his endurance, and the ointment made from it makes its wearer temporarily invulnerable. She has been keeping it. She makes it available now. She meets Jason at night in a grove sacred to Hecate. The encounter is described with a precision that makes it feel observed. The moon bright enough to see by, the torches they both carry, the specific quality of Medea's hands as she gives him the ointment, the specific quality of his attention as he receives it. He swears an oath, by Zeus, by the gods, by Hecate, by his own life and his hope of returning home. He swears that he will honor her, that if she helps him, he will take her with him and make her his wife. She believes him. Of course she believes him. She is young and she has been struck, and he is swearing by every divine power she holds sacred. And there is no reason at this point not to believe him. He means it. In the moment. The oath is genuine in the moment. What the moment becomes, what it looks like 10 years later in Corinth, when the political landscape has shifted and a more advantageous marriage has presented itself, is something neither of them can see yet. She tells him about the dragon's teeth warriors and the stone that will redirect their violence. She goes to the sleepless dragon with her herbs and her singing, and she brings it to the first stillness it has ever known. Jason takes the fleece, and they run. The flight from Colchis contains the act that the tradition has always found most difficult to absorb. More difficult, in some ways, than anything that happens later. Her younger brother, Absyrtus, was with them on the Argo. When Aeetes' ships began to gain on them, Medea killed him, cut him into pieces, scattered the pieces in the water behind the ship, because she knew her father. She knew that Aeetes, who understood power absolutely and had no patience for its loss, would not allow his son's body to float unburied, that the obligation to the dead was the one obligation that overrode everything else, even the pursuit of the daughter who had betrayed him. She used the law that governed all of them, including her father, including herself, against the immediate emergency. She was right. The ship stopped, and she sailed on with the pieces of her choice behind her in the water. I do not want to soften this. It is what it is, and Medea knows it better than anyone. But I do want to ask the question that the tradition tends not to ask. What were her options? A girl at the edge of the world, on a foreign ship, with a man she has just met, and 50 heroes she does not know, being pursued by her father's fleet. The ointment, the dragon's teeth, the sleepless dragon. All of those were things she could do with her knowledge. The flight was something she was already committed to. The calculation she made was made under conditions that no one who has not been in them is fully qualified to judge. She was purified of the killing later by Circe. Her aunt received them on Aea and performed the ritual cleansing that the murder of a kinsman required. What passed between Medea and Circe in private on that island is one of the great unrecorded conversations in Greek mythology. Two women of the same blood and the same power. One of them at the beginning of the story, the other has already lived. What did Circe see, looking at her niece? What did she recognize? What, if anything, did she try to tell her? The tradition doesn't say. Homer wasn't there, or Homer wasn't interested. They came to Corinth. The tradition implies a period of years. Children born, the household established, Jason a hero with the golden fleece, and the foreign wife, whose knowledge had made the hero possible. The gap between those two things, Jason's status, Medea's contribution to it, is one worth holding in mind for what comes next. And then Jason met Glass, Creon's daughter, the princess of Corinth. Native, Greek, politically valuable. Everything that Medea was not, in the particular way that mattered in Corinth. Jason decided to marry her. He told Medea. What he said, preserved most fully in Euripides' Medea, performed in Athens in 431 BCE and never stopped being performed since, was that this was for the best, for her, for the children, that the political alliance would secure their future, that Medea should understand this, that she should be grateful. He said this to the woman who had killed her brother for him. I want to stay with the specific quality of what Jason does here, because it is easy to make it simply cruel, and it is something more complicated and more recognizable than cruelty. He is not a villain in the way of someone who knows he is causing harm and chooses it deliberately. He has convinced himself. He has found a way to understand his own decision as not only acceptable, but genuinely beneficial to Medea, which is, in its way, worse. A man who knows he is doing something wrong and does it anyway is one thing. A man who has restructured his understanding of the situation so that what he is doing is actually good, who requires Medea to ratify that restructuring with her gratitude. That is something more insidious and more familiar. Medea does not shout. She does not immediately threaten. She goes very still. The stillness of someone whose emotion is so large that ordinary behavior has temporarily become impossible. And then she speaks with the careful precision of someone who has decided that the only appropriate response to being told something unbearable is to be completely clear about what they have heard. She reminds him, item by item, the oath by Zeus, by the gods, by Hecate, the ointment, the warriors, the brother in the water. She does not present this as an argument for changing his mind. She presents it as a record, the facts as they are. She is building something with them in front of him, and he is not watching carefully enough to understand what it is. Creon gives her one day. He is afraid of her, correctly, and wants her gone. She asks for one day on behalf of her children, to make arrangement. He gives it. She uses the day. She makes a wedding gift, a dress, a crown, both of extraordinary beauty, because Medea, when she makes something, makes it beautifully. The beauty is not incidental. The beauty is the delivery mechanism. You have to want to put them on. And into both, worked into the fabric and the metal, with the precision of someone whose entire practice is the marriage of intention and material, the pharmakeia that will release with body heat. Graeae puts the dress and crown on. The preparation activates. Graeae burns. Creon dies, trying to save her. And then Medea makes the choice that the world has never stopped looking at. She kills her children. Euripides is the first surviving source to make Medea the agent of the children's deaths. In earlier versions, they are killed by the Corinthians in revenge. What Euripides chooses to do, and what has made his version the definitive one, is give her the choice. Make it hers. Show us every step of her making it. The play does not allow you to look away from her love for them. It is present in every scene before the end. The way she holds them, the things she says to them. She knows what she is going to do. She does it not because she does not love them, but because of the specific, impossible logic of her situation. If she leaves them in Corinth, they will be killed by people taking revenge for Graeae and Creon, killed by strangers who feel nothing for them, and because they are hers. Because the one leverage she has left over a man who has taken everything from her is the only thing he cannot take by himself. The play ends with Medea in a chariot drawn by dragons, rising above Corinth. Jason screaming at her from the ground. She looks down at him. She has made him feel in a single day something proportionate to what he made her feel over years. Whether this is justice is a question Euripides asks and declines to answer. Whether it is understandable is a question the play answers every night it is performed, in the quality of the silence in the audience during those final scenes. People who came expecting a monster find instead something considerably more frightening. They find someone they understand. There is something about how Medea has been received over the centuries that tells us as much about the centuries as it does about her. In some eras, she is the cautionary tale, the foreigner, the barbarian, the woman who could not be assimilated and therefore destroyed everything around her. In others, she is something closer to a victim of Jason's ambition, of Corinthian xenophobia, of a world that used her knowledge and then discarded her when something more politically convenient came along. In the 20th and 21st centuries, as more women began to tell these stories, she became something else again. Not a monster, not a victim, but a person at the end of her options, making the only choices she could see. None of these readings is entirely wrong. She contains all of them. She is large enough. Euripides wrote her for an Athenian audience in 431 BCE, an audience that by all the conventions of its culture should have found her simply monstrous, should have experienced the play as a clear demonstration of the danger of foreign women and powerful women and women who love too much. Instead, the play produces sympathy, not endorsement, not absolution, but the recognition of a person, full, complicated, doing what the story she was placed in required of her, responsible for the choices she made, and also shaped by everything that made those choices feel like the only ones available. That Euripides produced this in that place, at that time, is its own kind of remarkable thing. The tradition he was working in had everything stacked against Medea. He looked at her anyway, and he saw her. She is somewhere east of here. She has been for a very long time. she is not finished. Before we go to the edge of the world, and we will before the night is over, I want to stay here for a moment, here, in the middle of things, in the space between the human sorceresses we have visited and the ancient threshold keepers who wait for us at the far edge of the map. I want to talk about fate, not fate in the loose, modern sense, not the comfortable idea that things happen for a reason, that the universe is arranged towards some benevolent purpose. The Greek world had a more austere understanding than that. For them, fate was simply the shape of things, the pattern that was woven before you arrived, and that would continue after you left. Not a plan that someone had designed for your benefit. A structure, a fact about the world as certain as the fact that the sun rose and the sea was salt, and the dead did not come back. The Greeks gave fate a form. 3 women, sitting at their work. They are called the Moirai. The word means portions or shares, the parts that each person is allotted. They are sometimes described as the daughters of Zeus and Themis, the goddess of divine law and order. They are sometimes older than that, daughters of Nyx, the night herself, which would make them older than the Olympian order, older than Zeus's authority. This disagreement in the sources is itself interesting. Who owns fate? Does it answer to the king of the gods, or does it predate him? The answer the tradition gives, in the way that traditions answer things that make those in power uncomfortable, is deliberately unclear. Zeus is sometimes said to be their leader. Zeus is also described in other accounts as bound by them, unable to override what they have decided. Even the king of the gods cannot unravel what the Moirai have woven. Their names are Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. Clotho, the spinner. She holds the distaff and draws out the raw fibre of a life, takes what does not yet exist in any particular form, and gives it the first shape, the first direction, the initial length of thread that is the beginning of everything. She is present at birth. She is the moment of beginning. Lachesis, the apportioner, the allotter. She measures. She takes what Clotho has spun and determines its length, not arbitrarily, not randomly, but according to the specific logic of what each life is and what it requires. She is the middle of the story. She is the measure of what you are given. Atropos, the inflexible, the unturning. Her name is a negation. Atropos, the one who cannot be turned, cannot be swayed, cannot be reasoned with or bargained with or moved by any appeal, however desperate or however justified. She carries the shears. When the time comes, and she knows when the time comes. She has always known. From the moment the thread was first spun, she cuts. There is no appeal. There is no extension. The cut is final, in the while that very few things in life are genuinely final. And it is this finality that gives her her name. Spinner, measurer, cutter, past, present, future, beginning, middle, end. They work at their loom, or their spindle. The imagery shifts between accounts. And what they produce is not cloth in any ordinary sense, but the tapestry of everything. Every life that has ever been lived or ever will be lived is in the work, each thread crossing and connecting with others in a pattern too vast to see from any single point within it. You are in there somewhere. Your thread was spun at your birth and is being measured now and will be cut. At what length only Lachesis and Atropos know, and they do not tell. The Moirai could not be petitioned. This is the detail that separates them from every other figure of power in the Greek cosmos. Temples could be built to Zeus, and prayers sent to Athena, and sacrifices offered to Apollo. And these gods might or might not respond, might be moved or not moved, might intervene in human affairs or decline to. The gods were powerful, but they were also, in some sense, available, approachable, capable of being influenced, subject to the same loves and grudges and preferences that make any powerful figure, at least theoretically, negotiable. The Moirai were not negotiable, not because they were hostile, but because they were impersonal in the most complete sense of the word. They did not dislike you. They did not dislike anyone. They simply saw, with a clear-eyed accuracy, of beings who exist outside the flow of time and can therefore see all of it at once, what the shape of your life was. And they wove it, and what was woven was real, in the way that very few things are real, not subject to revision, not open to interpretation. Even the gods were subject to them. Achilles had the choice. His mother Thetis, a sea goddess with knowledge of the fates' work, told him, a long life, peaceful, unremarkable, forgotten, or a short life, glorious, violent, remembered forever. He chose the short one. The thread was already spun to that length when he made the choice, because Clotho spun it at his birth, knowing which way the choice would go. But the Greeks did not experience this as paradox. The choice was real, and the fate was real, and they were the same thing, seen from different angles. Zeus himself, watching the battle at Troy, considered saving his son Sarpedon from death. The scales of fate had already been consulted. Sarpedon's death had been decided. Hera reminded Zeus of this, gently, but with the firmness of someone who understands the consequences of unpicking a thread that has already been woven. Zeus wept golden tears for his son and let him die. The king of the gods, weeping at what he could not change. There is something in this that I find genuinely moving. Not the death of Sarpedon, but the image of Zeus at the limit of his power, which is simultaneously the limit of all power. The point where even the greatest force in the cosmos hits something it cannot override. And that something is held by 3 women at their loom. The Greeks honored the Moirai, not with the elaborate temple rituals of the Olympians, not with the festivals and the processions and the athletic games. More quietly than that. Offerings at crossroads, Hecate's territory again, and the overlap is not coincidental. Both the Moirai and Hecate presiding over threshold moments, moments of passage between one state and another. Libations poured without the accompaniment of musical instruments, because the Moirai's work was too serious for music. White robes and white offerings, the colour of what is beyond dispute. They were present at births. Some traditions held that they arrived at the cradle of every newborn child within 3 days, spinning out the child's fate there at the bedside in the way that the Norse fate weavers, Urda and Verdandi and Skuld, arrived at every Norse birth and made their pronouncements. The Norse norns and the Greek Moirai are strikingly similar. Both are 3. Both weave or spin. Both are present at birth and determine what the life will contain. Both are more powerful than the gods above them. This resemblance is not coincidence. It is too precise, too structurally consistent across 2 traditions that develop largely independently. The scholarly explanation is a shared Indo-European origin. Both traditions descend from an ancestral culture that already had this figure. The 3 female fate weavers already had the textile metaphor for destiny, already understood that the holding of fate was women's work. But it goes further than Norse and Greek. In Slavic tradition, the Sudis, or Rojinis, or Sujanis, depending on the region, are 3 women who arrive at the birth of a child and pronounce its fate, each speaking in turn, the third pronouncement being binding and unalterable. In Baltic tradition, 7 sister goddesses weave the threads of human lives into cloth. In Roman tradition, the pharmakeia, Nona, Decuma, Mortar, weave and cut. In Persian tradition, there are the fravashi, protective spirits attached to each person from before birth, who know the shape of the life that will be lived. The Hindu tradition speaks of Vidhi, the writer who inscribes each person's fate on their forehead in the moment of birth. Across cultures, across centuries, across traditions with no documented contact, the same figure. 3 women, usually, sometimes more, weaving or spinning or writing, present at the beginning of each life, holding what cannot be changed. I find myself asking why it was always women. The practical answer is that women wove. In every pre-industrial society we know of, the making of cloth, the spinning of thread, the weaving of fabric was women's work, not exclusively but predominantly, consistently across the ancient world. The Greeks, the Norse, the Slavic peoples, the Romans, in all of them, the women of the household were the ones who sat at the spindle and the loom, hour after hour, producing the fabric that the household needed to survive. It was skilled work, demanding work, work that required sustained attention and accumulated knowledge. It was also invisible work, not celebrated, not memorialized, not recorded in the epics that celebrated the men who fought wars. And so, when the ancient imagination reached for a metaphor for the way destiny worked, the thread that begins at birth and ends at death, the pattern too vast to see from within, the measuring and the cutting that no one can escape, it reached for the image that was most familiar. The women at the loom, the hands that made the fabric that everything depended on, the work that everyone needed and no one particularly noticed until it stopped. The Moirai do not look up as the night passes. They never look up, or they always look up, which amounts to the same thing, because their sight encompasses everything, and your particular thread is just one among the countless millions on the loom. But it is there. It has been there since Clotho first set it spinning at the moment of your birth. It is being measured now, and the measure is known, and Atropos has her shears. This is not a comfortable thought. I offer it anyway, because the Greek world found in it something that is, in a strange way, more comforting than the alternatives. The shape of things is held, not by a benevolent God who means everything for the best, simply held. The pattern exists, the weaving is real, and at the root of everything, 3 women are paying absolute attention to every thread, including the smallest ones, including yours. Now we go to the edge of the world, further than Colchis, further than any place with a name that the Greek world had agreed on, to the place where the ocean runs out of continent to border, where the sky comes down low and flat, and the light, when there is light, has the quality of something that has been traveling for a very long time and lost something along the way. 3 women, born old. They came into existence already carrying the full weight of what they were. grey hair from the first breath, the pallor of extreme age settled into them before they had lived a day. Their names are Penfredo, Enyo, and Dano. Dread, horror, and alarm. Not names given to frighten, names that are simply accurate. The qualities these three women embody so completely that the qualities became their identities. They are the daughters of Phorcys and Ceto, sea deities of the old kind, older than the Olympians, belonging to the layer of divinity that preceded order. Their siblings are the Gorgons, Steno, Euryale, and Medusa, whose gaze turns living things to stone. The Graeae and the Gorgons are sisters, and the family resemblance is not physical, but essential. They are all forms of the same quality, the same power that exists at the boundary of the known world, that the Greek imagination placed at the edge of the map, because the edge was the only appropriate location for something this extreme. Between them, the three Graeae share one eye and one tooth. One eye. Between three women who guard the threshold to the most dangerous knowledge in the world, passed from hand to hand, held in the palm of one woman while she sees and the others are blind, then given to the next. The sight always present and always in motion, never the permanent possession of any one of them, always the shared resource of all three, and none individually. I want to sit with this image. What does it mean to see this way? Not to own your sight, not to have the sovereign relationship with vision that the rest of us take completely for granted. The assumption that the world you see is yours, your private, unmediated access to the visible. The Graeae cannot assume this. The eye must be given, must be received with the knowledge that it will be asked for again, that the time with it is limited, that the world you are seeing right now is the world through borrowed light, and yet they see everything. Together, across their three presences, they have continuous coverage that no single pair of eyes could provide, because no single creature can look in all directions at once, and no single creature can stay awake forever. The Graeae can. One is always holding the eye. The sight never goes entirely dark. It simply moves. There is something in this that feels like a truth about perception itself, that seeing is never as sovereign as it feels, that the eye we look with is always in some sense shared, always looking through the accumulated seeing of everything that has looked before us. The Graeae make this visible, literalize it. They are the explicit form of something that is true of all seeing. Perseus came to them. He needed to kill Medusa. To do this, he needed equipment, the winged sandals, the kibyssus in which to carry Medusa's head without looking at it directly, the helm of Hades that makes its wearer invisible. Only the Graeae knew where the nymphs were who held these things. Only passage through them led to that knowledge. He came to the Graeae place, and he watched them. He learned the rhythm of the passing, the brief moment of transit when the eye was in the air, between one hand and the next, belonging to no one. And in that moment, he took it. The tradition presents this as cleverness, as heroic ingenuity, the particular Greek virtue of the man who finds the unexpected solution to the obstacle in his path. Perseus the hero, outwitting the monsters. And I find myself sitting with another way of looking at it. He came to three women who had done nothing to him, who were not his enemies, who had not wronged him, who were simply in possession of knowledge he needed, and he took the most essential thing they had, their only eye, their shared sight, their ability to see the world at all. And he held it hostage until they gave him what he wanted. He used their vulnerability, which he had created by theft, as leverage. The tradition calls this cleverness. The tradition is not wrong that it required intelligence. But it is interesting that the tradition does not ask how the Graeae experienced it, does not give them an interiority, a reaction beyond the functional one of capitulating to the demand. They are obstacles in Perseus's story. They are not people in their own. They bargained. They told him what he needed to know. He returned the eye. And Perseus went on to become the hero with a constellation, and the founding myth, and the particular immortality of someone whose story had been told so many times that the telling has become a fact about the world. The Graeae are still at the edge of the world. This is the thing the Perseus story obscures by being so dramatic. They were there before he came, and they are there after he left. His arrival was an interruption to something continuous. He took the eye for a moment and gave it back, and the passing resumed, as it had before he came, as it will after every hero who passes through this grey place on the way to the genuinely dangerous thing beyond it. They see everything that approaches from the direction of the known world. They have seen it before it arrives. They will see it after it leaves. 3 women at the edge of things, passing one clear eye between them, watching. The sight is never any one of theirs alone, but it never goes dark. We come back to the crossroads. We always come back to the crossroads. It is the nature of crossroads. They are the architecture of choice itself. And as long as there are choices to be made, there will be crossroads. And as long as there are crossroads, there will be a need for what Hecate offers, which is not direction. She does not tell you which road to take. She is the one who stands at the point where the roads diverge and holds the light, who makes the divergence visible, who ensures that when you stand at the crossroads, you are standing in it fully, without the comfortable illusion that there was only ever one way to go. Look at the women we have visited tonight, in the light of her torches. Circe, who is reduced by the tradition to a single image, the woman who turns men into pigs, and who, when you look at her story more slowly, more carefully, turns out to be something considerably more interesting than that image contains. A woman alone on an island who had been given power and no instruction in how to use it, who learned from experience what the power was for and what it cost, who met, once, a man she could not transform, and gave him a year and then let him go, and gave him on the way out the tools he needed to survive what came next, who understood the Sirens because she understood what it was to draw men toward you with your voice, and who knew the difference between the drawing that leads somewhere and the drawing that only ever ends on the rocks. Medea, who the tradition made into the ultimate cautionary figure, the dangerous foreign woman, the mother who kills, and who, when you look at her story from her own side of it, was a girl at the edge of the world who made choices under conditions that the tradition was not particularly interested in examining, who gave everything she had to someone who swore by every god she held sacred that he would honor it, who was then told, in Corinth, surrounded by Greeks who found her foreign and her power unsettling, that she should be grateful, who was many things, most of them tragic, who was not, whatever the tradition preferred to believe, simply a monster, the Moirai, who sat at their loom before the world had its present shape, and will be sitting there when it has moved on to its next one, who held the thread of every life, including the lives of the gods, including the life of the world itself, with an attention so complete and so impersonal that it transcended both love and cruelty and became something more fundamental than either, who were, in their quiet way, more powerful than Zeus, whose counterparts, the Norse Norns, the Slavic Sudis, the Roman Parcae, the Baltic Fate Sisters, appeared in culture after culture across the ancient world, always female, always weaving, always holding what could not be changed. The people who built all those civilizations independently reached for the same image when they tried to understand fate. 3 women at their work, paying attention to every thread. The Graeae, who guard the last threshold before the world runs out. 3 ancient women passing one clear eye between them, seeing everything, never owning the sight individually, but never losing it collectively, who were used as a plot obstacle in a hero's story, and whose own experience of that encounter the tradition never thought to record. And behind all of them, threaded through all of them like the current in deep water that you cannot see from the surface, Hecate, at every crossroads they ever came to, invoked at the moments of greatest extremity, when the ordinary categories had run out and something older was needed, present at the boundary between what was known and what was not, between what was safe and what was necessary, between the woman the world wanted them to be and the woman they actually were. She came when called. There is something the Greek world understood about the women in these stories that the official culture, the culture of the agora and the law courts and the philosophical schools, the culture that was almost entirely male and knew it, that the official culture worked quite hard not to understand, that the knowledge these women had was real, that the pharmakeia was rooted in the actual world, in the actual properties of actual plants, in the actual workings of desire and grief and transformation on actual human bodies, that Circe's herbs and Medea's preparations were not fictions, that the women who knew these things had earned the knowing through attention and practice and the specific accumulated understanding that comes from paying close attention to the world around you for a very long time, and that this knowledge was dangerous, not because it was dark, but because it was independent, because it did not require the structures of the official world, because a woman who could heal with herbs did not need a male physician, because a woman who could read the stars did not need a male astronomer, because a woman who could call on Hecate at the crossroads had a source of authority that no king and no philosopher could give her or take away. That is what was frightening about them, not the pigs, not the burning dress, not even the dragon singing itself to sleep, the independence, the self-sufficiency of the knowing. The tradition made them monsters because monsters can be contained in stories, because a monster is something you tell a story about, and the telling gives you a certain amount of control over the thing. You can say, here is what the monster did. You can say, and this is why we were right to be afraid. You can organize the story so that the monster is punished or expelled, or turned into something less threatening, or simply located on an island or at the edge of the world at a safe distance from the things that the official culture is trying to protect. What the tradition could not quite manage. What Euripides in particular could not quite manage. And he tried. He wrote the play that was supposed to settle the question, was to make Medea simply monstrous. The play won third prize, the accounts tell us, which means it was considered inferior to the plays that defeated it. The Athenian judges preferred the version of the story that was tidier. That kept the woman in her proper category. And yet Medea's play has outlasted every other play from that competition, has outlasted most plays from any competition, has been performed continuously for 2,500 years, in every language, in every theatrical tradition, because it will not stay tidy, because every generation finds in it something that recognizes them back. The stories that last are the ones that told the truth, even when the truth was inconvenient. The crossroads is very quiet now. The night is at its deepest, the point where the dark has fully settled, and the first suggestion of dawn is still hours away. The three roads go out in three directions into the dark, each one a version of what tomorrow could be. Hecate's torches burn. They make a small, warm circle in the middle of the dark. Not enough light to see the roads by. Not enough to make out where they lead. Enough to see the divergence. Enough to understand that there are three. Enough to stand in for a little while before choosing. The sea is somewhere to the south. That wine-dark sea, still moving in the dark, still carrying on its surface the faint phosphorescence it makes for itself on certain nights. The sailors who knew it best said it was the sea, remembering all the ships that had ever rusted, all the stories that had travelled back and forth across its surface, all the women on all the islands who had watched those ships approach from far away and known, before the ships knew themselves, what kind of arrival it was going to be. Let the warmth of that sea reach you, even here. The Mediterranean warmth that persists through the night, the quality of air that has been heated by stone all day and releases the heat slowly in the dark, as though the land is reluctant to give up what the sun gave it. The torches are still burning. They have been burning for 3,000 years at the crossroads of the world, and they have not gone out yet, and they will not go out tonight. Sleep now. Hecate is keeping watch. The veil is thin tonight. It always is, in the old places, in the places where the herbs grew and the potions were made, and the names of the dead were spoken at the water's edge. And the goddess with the torches came when she was called. Sleep. The crossroads will be there in the morning, and so will she.